The stranger riding into Verdi, Nevada on that scorching July morning in 1882, had eyes the color of weathered denim and a heart grown cold from too many empty seasons alone. Kurt Ingram pulled his mare to a stop outside the general store, his joints protesting after 3 days of riding fence lines and searching for strays that had wandered too far from his ranch. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street, and the only sounds were the occasional whinny from a hitched horse and the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer. He dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the packed earth with a soft thud, and that was when he heard it. A voice, soft and melodic, drifting from the narrow alley between the general store and the saloon. "There you are, sweet girl. I know you must be so hungry." Kurt tied his horse to the post and walked toward the alley, curiosity pulling him forward. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. A woman knelt in the dirt, her faded calico dress pooling around her like petals of a wilted flower. Her auburn hair, escaped from its pins, caught the sunlight filtering between the buildings. She held out her hand, palm up, and in it were scraps of what looked like dried beef. 3 scraggly cats circled her, their ribs showing through mangy fur, cautiously approaching the offering. "It is not much, I know," she continued, her voice tender, "but it is all I have today. Tomorrow I will try to bring more." One of the cats, a gray tabby missing part of its ear, finally ventured close enough to snatch a piece of meat from her palm. The woman's face transformed with a smile so radiant that Kurt felt something shift in his chest, like a door long rusted shut suddenly creaking open. "Miss," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. She startled, nearly toppling over in her crouch. The cats scattered into the shadows. She turned to face him, and Kurt saw that her eyes were the most unusual shade of amber, flecked with gold. Her face was thin, too thin, with sharp cheekbones that spoke of hunger and hardship, but there was a gentleness in her expression that made his breath catch. "I apologize," she said quickly, scrambling to her feet. "I was not blocking your way, was I? I will move." "No, no," Kurt said, holding up a hand. "I did not mean to disturb you. I just heard you talking and wondered if you needed help." She brushed the dirt from her dress, a futile gesture given how worn the fabric already was. "I am quite well, thank you. I was just feeding the strays." "They have no one else?" Kurt studied her more carefully now. The dress had been mended so many times that he could see patches upon patches. Her boots, peeking from beneath her hem, had holes in them. But it was the way her hand unconsciously pressed against her stomach that told him the most. She was not just thin, she was starving. "When did you last eat?" The question came out before he could stop it, her chin lifted, pride flashing in those amber eyes. "That is none of your concern, sir." "Maybe not," he admitted. "But you are feeding these cats with what looks like your own provisions, and you look like you could use a meal yourself." "The cats need it more than I do." "Do they now?" Kurt found himself moving closer, drawn by something he could not name. "Because from where I am standing, you both look equally in need." She crossed her arms, defensive. "I manage just fine." "I am sure you do." He paused, then made a decision that surprised even himself. "My name is Kurt Ingram. I own a ranch about 5 miles west of here. And I am about to go into that general store and buy supplies for the week. Would you do me the honor of letting me buy you lunch at the restaurant afterward? I do not even know you. You know my name now, and I know you have a kind heart because you are feeding strays instead of yourself." He gentled his voice. "Please, it would be my pleasure." She studied him for a long moment, those unusual eyes searching his face for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her because she finally nodded. "My name is Olivia Dawson. And I suppose I could accept your offer, provided you understand it is only lunch and nothing more." "Only lunch," Kurt agreed, though his heart was pounding in a way it had not in years. They walked together to the general store, and Kurt noticed how people on the street either ignored Olivia completely or looked at her with barely concealed contempt. A matron in a fine blue dress actually pulled her skirts aside as they passed, as though poverty might be contagious. Kurt felt anger kindle in his gut, but Olivia seemed not to notice, or perhaps she had simply grown accustomed to such treatment. Inside the store, the proprietor, a balding man named Henderson, greeted Kurt warmly. "Mr. Ingram, good to see you. What can I get for you today?" "I need flour, sugar, coffee, bacon, beans," Kurt began, then glanced at Olivia. "And a pound of your best dried beef." Henderson's eyes flicked to Olivia and his expression cooled. "I see you have company." "I do," Kurt said evenly. "Is that a problem?" "No problem at all," Henderson said, though his tone suggested otherwise. He began gathering the items Kurt had requested, wrapping them in brown paper and twine. Olivia had drifted to a corner of the store where bolts of fabric were displayed. She ran her fingers over a length of blue cotton, so soft and wistful in her touch that Kurt felt his throat tighten. He walked over to Henderson and lowered his voice. "Add 3 yards of that blue fabric to my order, and a spool of matching thread." "That is expensive material," Henderson warned. "I know what it costs, add it." When the purchases were tallied and paid for, Kurt handed the package of dried beef to Olivia. "For your friends in the alley." She took it, confusion and something like wonder crossing her face. "This is too much. I cannot accept this." "It is already bought and paid for. Would be a waste not to use it." He picked up his other supplies and gestured toward the door. "Now, about that lunch." The restaurant was a modest establishment with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh bread wafting from the kitchen. The owner, a woman named Mrs. Patterson, showed them to a table by the window. Kurt noticed how she smiled at him but barely acknowledged Olivia. It made him wonder what circumstances had brought this woman to such a low place in this town's estimation. They sat, and a young waitress brought water and menus. Olivia stared at the menu as though she were reading a foreign language, her eyes moving over the items with such longing that Kurt had to look away. "Order whatever you want," he said. "I mean it." "I should not," she whispered. "This is too generous, Olivia." He waited until she met his eyes. "Please, let me do this." When the waitress returned, Olivia ordered the chicken with vegetables and potatoes, her voice barely audible. Kurt ordered the same, along with fresh bread and butter. As they waited for the food, an uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Kurt was not accustomed to making conversation, especially not with women. His life had been solitary for so long that he had almost forgotten how to be around people. "How long have you been in Verdi?" he finally asked. Olivia folded her hands in her lap. "About 3 months. I came here after my father passed away in Virginia City." "I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you." She took a sip of water. "He was a miner. There was an accident. After he died, I had nothing left there, so I thought I might find work here. But it has been more difficult than I anticipated." "What kind of work have you been looking for?" "Anything, really. Laundry, cooking, housekeeping, but no one seems interested in hiring me." She met his eyes again, and he saw the steel beneath her gentleness. "I think perhaps my circumstances have given me a reputation I did not earn." "What circumstances?" She hesitated, then seemed to decide there was no point in hiding the truth. "I live in a shack on the edge of town. It is barely standing, and I have no money for rent anywhere else." People assume things about a woman living alone in such conditions. They assume I must be of loose morals, or that I am a drunk, or worse. None of it is true, but truth does not seem to matter much when people have already made up their minds. Kurt felt that anger kindle again, hotter this time. That is not right, perhaps not, but it is the way of things. She managed a small smile. At least the cats do not judge me. The food arrived, and Kurt watched as Olivia stared at her plate with an expression close to reverence. She picked up her fork with a trembling hand and took a small bite of chicken. Her eyes closed, and she made a sound that was almost a sob. "When did you last have a proper meal?" Kurt asked gently. She swallowed, opened her eyes. 4 days ago. I managed to earn a few cents mending a torn dress for someone, and I bought bread. But before that, it had been nearly a week. Kurt set down his fork, his appetite suddenly gone despite the rumbling in his own stomach. "You have been starving." "I have been managing," she corrected. "There is a difference, not much of one." He pushed his plate toward her. "Eat, please. I cannot take your food." "I am not very hungry. Please, Olivia, eat." This time she did not argue. She ate slowly, deliberately, savoring each bite as though it might be her last. Kurt watched her, his mind working through a problem he had not expected to encounter today. He had come to town for supplies, nothing more. But now he sat across from a woman who was clearly desperate, clearly starving, and something in him could not walk away from that. "I have a proposition for you," he said when she had finished most of the food on both plates. She looked up warily. "What kind of proposition?" "Nothing improper," he assured her quickly. "I need help at the ranch. My housekeeper left 6 months ago to live with her daughter in California, and I have been managing on my own, but it is getting difficult. I could use someone to cook, clean, do laundry, basic household work. In exchange, I would provide room and board and a salary of $20 a month." Olivia's eyes widened. $20. "It is hard work," he said. "The ranch is isolated. You would be living there in the spare bedroom, but you would have your own space, 3 meals a day, and honest work. If you are interested." She stared at him as though he had just offered her the moon. "Why would you do this? You do not know me. I know you have a kind heart. I know you are willing to work, and I know you need help." He leaned forward. "I am not looking for anything more than a housekeeper, Olivia. I give you my word on that. This would be a job, nothing more. You would be safe." Tears welled in her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. "I do not know what to say. Say yes. Come work for me. Give it a month, and if you do not like it, I will bring you back to town and pay you for the time you worked. No questions asked." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers twisting the napkin in her lap. Finally, she looked up at him, and he saw hope shining in those amber eyes like a candle lit in a dark room. "Yes, I will do it. Thank you, Mr. Ingram. You have no idea what this means to me." "Call me Kurt," he said, and felt that rusty door in his chest creak open a little wider. They left the restaurant, and Kurt arranged to meet Olivia at her shack to collect whatever belongings she had. When he saw where she had been living, his anger turned to something colder and harder. The structure was barely more than 4 walls and a roof, with gaps in the boards wide enough to see through. Inside, there was a thin blanket on the dirt floor, a crate that served as a table, and a single dress hanging from a nail. That was everything she owned. "Give me a moment to gather my things," she said. But there was nothing to gather beyond the dress and the blanket. Kurt went back to the general store and retrieved the supplies he had bought, including the fabric he had purchased for her. When he handed her the wrapped parcel, she opened it and gasped. "You bought this for me. Thought you might like to make yourself a new dress, if you know how to sew." "I do," she whispered, clutching the fabric to her chest. "Thank you. I will make this last forever." They loaded everything onto his horse, and Kurt helped Olivia up into the saddle. He swung up behind her, acutely aware of how small and fragile she felt against him. The ride to the ranch took just under an hour, following a dusty road that wound through scrub brush and rocky terrain. The land here was harsh and unforgiving, but it had a stark beauty that Kurt had grown to love over the years. The ranch house came into view as they crested a low hill. It was a simple structure, built from wood and stone, with a wide porch and a stone chimney. Behind it stood the barn and several outbuildings. The corral held a dozen horses, and beyond that, cattle dotted the landscape like dark smudges against the golden grass. "It is not fancy," Kurt said as they approached, "but it is solid, and it is home." Olivia said nothing, but he felt her straighten in the saddle, taking it all in. He helped her down and led her inside. The interior was dim and cool, with simple furniture and floors that badly needed sweeping. Dust covered every surface, and dishes were piled in the dry sink. "I apologize for the mess," Kurt said, suddenly embarrassed. "I have let things go these past months." "It is fine," Olivia said, already moving through the space with an assessing eye. "I can have this cleaned up in no time." He showed her to the spare bedroom, a small space with a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the eastern pastures. "This will be yours. There are linens in the chest at the foot of the bed. The washroom is out back, and I will make sure you have everything you need for bathing and such." She set her meager belongings on the bed and turned to him with tears streaming down her face. "I do not know how to thank you." Kurt shifted uncomfortably. "No need for thanks. You will earn your keep, I promise you that. This is not charity." "I know." She wiped at her tears. "But it feels like a miracle all the same." He left her to settle in and went to tend to his horse. As he unsaddled the mare and brushed her down, he found himself thinking about the woman now in his house. What had possessed him to make that offer? He had been alone for so long, had grown comfortable in his solitude. Bringing someone into his home, into his life, was a risk he had not taken in years. But when he remembered the way she had fed those cats with her last scraps of food, when he thought about her starving in that shack while refusing to give up her kindness, he knew he had made the right choice. She needed help, and maybe, just maybe, he needed something too. He was not sure what yet, but standing in the barn with dust motes dancing in the afternoon light, he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt hope. That evening, Olivia cooked dinner with the supplies Kurt had bought. He sat at the table, ostensibly reading the newspaper, but really watching her move around his kitchen. She worked with quiet efficiency, humming softly to herself. The smell of frying bacon and fresh biscuits filled the house, and Kurt's stomach growled in anticipation. When she set the food on the table, he was stunned by the spread. Bacon, eggs, biscuits with butter and honey, fried potatoes with onions. It was more food than he usually bothered to make for himself, and it looked delicious. "I hope this is acceptable," Olivia said, sitting down across from him. "I made do with what was available. This is more than acceptable. This is a feast." Kurt bowed his head briefly, an old habit from childhood, then began to eat. The food was even better than it looked. "You are an excellent cook." She smiled, and he realized it was the first genuine, unguarded smile he had seen from her. It transformed her face, making her beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional prettiness and everything to do with inner light. They ate in companionable silence, and afterward, Olivia insisted on cleaning up despite Kurt's protests that she had done enough for one day. He finally retreated to the porch, where he sat in his rocking chair and watched the sun set over the distant mountains. The sky turned shades of orange and pink and purple, and he felt a contentment settle over him that he had almost forgotten was possible. Olivia emerged from the house sometime later, drying her hands on a towel. "May I join you?" "Of course." She sat on the porch steps, her back against the post, and looked out at the darkening landscape. "It is beautiful here." "I think so." Kurt rocked gently. "It can be hard, especially in winter, but I have never wanted to be anywhere else. How long have you owned the ranch? 10 years. I bought it when I was 25 from a man who wanted to go back east. It was run down then, barely more than a claim and a few head of cattle. But I built it up, piece by piece. It is not the biggest spread in Nevada, but it is mine. You should be proud. It is clear you have worked hard. I have. He paused. What about you? What was your life like before Verdi? Olivia was quiet for a moment. My mother died when I was young. My father raised me and we moved around a lot following mining work. Virginia City was supposed to be our big chance. He was sure he would strike it rich. But it never happened. And then he died and I was alone. No other family, none that I know of, or none that would claim me at least. She pulled her knees up to her chest. I always thought I would get married, have a family of my own. But opportunities for that were limited when you are constantly moving from mining camp to mining camp. And then, when I needed help most, I learned that people are not as kind as I had hoped. Kurt heard the pain in her voice, the disappointment. Not everyone is cruel. Some people are just scared or ignorant. Perhaps. She turned to look at him. But you are neither of those things. You saw someone in need and helped them without asking for anything in return. That is rare. I am asking for something. I am asking you to work. You know what I mean. She smiled again, softer this time. You are a good man, Kurt Ingram. He did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They sat together as darkness fell completely and the stars emerged, bright and numerous in the clear Nevada sky. Kurt found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did, the tension he usually carried in his shoulders easing. There was something peaceful about having another person here, someone to share the evening with. He had not realized how much he had missed that until now. The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Kurt rose early to tend to the animals and check the fence lines. Olivia had breakfast waiting when he came in, and the house smelled of coffee and biscuits and bacon. She cleaned and organized with tireless energy, transforming the dusty, neglected house into a home again. Curtains were washed and rehung. Floors were swept and scrubbed. The windows gleamed. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch and talk. Kurt found himself sharing things he had never told anyone, about his childhood on a farm in Missouri, about the parents he had lost to illness, about the loneliness that had driven him west, searching for something he could not name. Olivia, in turn, told him about growing up in mining camps, about learning to cook from other miners' wives, about the books she loved to read when she could find them. She had a quick mind and a sharp wit that surprised him. She had opinions about politics and philosophy that challenged his own thinking. He found himself looking forward to their evening conversations more than anything else in his day. 3 weeks after Olivia arrived, Kurt rode into Verdi for more supplies. He stopped at the general store and was loading his purchases when Henderson leaned over the counter. So, how is that arrangement working out? With the Dawson woman, Kurt straightened. It is working out fine. She is an excellent housekeeper. Henderson's expression was knowing, almost leering. I am sure she is earning her keep in all sorts of ways. Kurt's hands clenched into fists. What are you implying? Nothing at all. Henderson held up his hands. Just that it is convenient is all. A man like you living alone, a desperate woman with nowhere else to go. You listen to me, Kurt said, his voice low and dangerous. Olivia Dawson is my employee, nothing more. And if I hear you or anyone else spreading rumors about her, I will make sure you regret it. Are we clear? Henderson's face flushed. No need for threats. I was just making conversation. Make it about something else. Kurt grabbed his supplies and walked out, anger simmering in his veins. The encounter bothered him all the way back to the ranch. He knew how people thought, knew how they would interpret a woman living in his house. He had been naive to think otherwise. But what bothered him more was the realization that Henderson's insinuation, while offensive, had touched on something Kurt had been trying to ignore. He was developing feelings for Olivia. It had happened so gradually that he had not noticed at first. But over the past few weeks, she had become the first thing he thought about when he woke and the last thing on his mind before he slept. He found excuses to come in from the fields early. He noticed the way the lamplight caught in her hair. He memorized the sound of her laugh. And that terrified him. Kurt had been alone for so long that he had forgotten how to be with someone. More than that, he had built walls around his heart to protect himself from loss. His parents had died. The woman he had courted years ago had left him for a banker's son with more money and better prospects. He had learned that it was easier not to feel anything at all. But Olivia was dismantling those walls brick by brick, whether she knew it or not. When he arrived home, she was in the garden she had started near the house, pulling weeds from around the tomato plants she had insisted on putting in. She looked up as he approached, shading her eyes against the sun. "You are back early. Finished what I needed to do." He dismounted and began unloading the supplies. "Thought I would get back and help you with those fence posts that need replacing. I already did them." He stared at her. "You did what?" "I replaced the posts by the eastern pasture. You mentioned they were leaning, so I took care of it." She wiped her hands on her apron, looking pleased with herself. It was not that difficult. Kurt did not know whether to be impressed or concerned. "That is hard work. You should have waited for me." "I am stronger than I look, and I wanted to help. You do so much around here by yourself." He realized, looking at her standing there covered in dirt and sweat but smiling with pride, that she was not just working to earn her keep. She was invested in this place. She cared about it, about him. That realization should have scared him more than it did. Over dinner that night, Kurt found himself watching her more openly than usual. She had filled out over the past weeks, the gauntness leaving her face and figure. She looked healthier, stronger. The dress she wore was the one she had made from the blue fabric, and it fit her perfectly, bringing out the gold flecks in her eyes. "Is something wrong?" she asked, catching him staring. "No. I was just thinking that you look well. The ranch seems to agree with you." She blushed, a pretty pink coloring her cheeks. "I feel better than I have in a long time. I think I was dying in that town, Kurt. Slowly maybe, but dying all the same. You saved my life. You are doing that yourself. I just gave you a chance. You gave me more than that." She set down her fork and met his eyes. "You gave me hope. You treated me like I mattered when everyone else had written me off. Do you know what that means to a person?" Kurt's throat felt tight. "I am glad I could help." She smiled, but there was something wistful in it. "You are always so formal, so careful with your words. Do you ever let yourself feel things, Kurt? Or have you built walls so high that nothing can get through?" He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "I should check on the horses." "Kurt, I am sorry. I did not mean to overstep." "You did not." He grabbed his hat from the peg by the door. "I just need some air." He left before she could say anything else, before he could do something foolish like tell her she was right. He had built walls. But she was breaking them down, and he did not know if he was ready for what that meant. Kurt spent an hour in the barn, uselessly checking on horses that did not need checking on. When he finally returned to the house, the lamps were dimmed and Olivia had retreated to her room. He stood in the kitchen, looking at the dishes she had already washed and put away, at the wildflowers she had picked and placed in a jar on the table, at all the small touches that made this place feel alive again. He was falling in love with her. The admission came clear and sharp, undeniable. He was falling in love with Olivia Dawson, and he had no idea what to do about it. Sleep did not come easily that night. Kurt lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the house creak and settle around him. He could hear Olivia moving in her room, probably unable to sleep as well. He wondered if she was thinking about him the way he was thinking about her. If she felt this pull between them that seemed to grow stronger every day. The next morning, Kurt was already gone when Olivia woke. He had left a note saying he needed to move some cattle to a different pasture and would be back by evening. The truth was he needed distance, needed time to sort through his feelings before he did something reckless. He worked hard all day, pushing himself and his horse until they were both exhausted. But no matter how hard he worked, he could not stop thinking about her, about the way she hummed while she cooked, about the gentleness in her hands when she tended the garden, about the intelligence in her eyes and the kindness in her heart. By the time he returned to the ranch, the sun was setting and he had made a decision. He could not keep pretending that this was just a working arrangement. He had feelings for Olivia, strong feelings, and he needed to know if she felt the same. If she did not, then he would honor that and maintain their professional relationship. But if she did, if there was even a chance she might come to care for him the way he cared for her, then he had to take that risk. He found her on the porch, as he had hoped he would. She was sitting on the steps, watching the sunset, and she looked up as he approached. "You were gone a long time," she said. "I was starting to worry." Kurt dismounted and tied his horse to the rail. He sat down beside her closer than he usually did and took off his hat. "I needed to think." "About what?" "About this. About us." He turned to face her fully. "Olivia, I need to be honest with you. When I offered you this job, it was because you needed help and I needed a housekeeper. That was all it was supposed to be. But somewhere along the way, things changed for me. You changed things for me." Her eyes widened, but she did not speak, just waited for him to continue. "I have been alone for a long time," Kurt went on, the words coming easier now that he had started. "I told myself I preferred it that way, that it was simpler, safer. But having you here, sharing meals and conversations and quiet evenings, I realized I was not living before. I was just existing. You make me want to live again, Olivia. You make me want things I had given up on wanting." "Kurt," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I know this is not professional. I know I am your employer and that puts you in an awkward position. If you do not feel the same way, I understand. I will never mention it again and nothing has to change. You can stay as long as you want, and I will respect whatever boundaries you set. But I had to tell you. I had to be honest about how I feel." Olivia was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she was also smiling. "You foolish, wonderful man. Do you really not know?" "Know what?" "That I feel the same way, that I have been falling in love with you since the day you found me in that alley." She took his face in her hands, her palms warm against his skin. "I have been so scared to admit it, even to myself. I thought you saw me as a charity case, as someone you pitied. I never imagined you might feel this way." Kurt's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. "You love me." "Yes, I love you." She laughed through her tears. "I love your kindness and your strength. I love the way you care for your animals and your land. I love your quiet strength and the way you listen when I talk. I love everything about you, Kurt Ingram." He kissed her then, unable to hold back any longer. It was gentle at first, tentative, as though they were both afraid of breaking something precious. But then, Olivia wrapped her arms around his neck and deepened the kiss, and Kurt pulled her close, feeling like he had been wandering in the desert his whole life and had finally found water. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kurt rested his forehead against hers. "I do not want you to be my housekeeper anymore." Olivia stiffened, pulling back slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean I want you to be more than that. I want you to be my partner, my equal. I want to share this ranch with you, share my life with you." He took her hands in his. I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other for a few weeks, but I have never been more certain of anything. I love you, Olivia. Will you stay? Not as my employee, but as the woman I am courting, as the woman I hope to marry someday. More tears spilled down her cheeks, but she nodded vigorously. Yes. Yes, Kurt, I will stay. I want nothing more than to be with you. They kissed again, longer this time, and Kurt felt something in his soul settle into place. This was right. She was right. He did not know what he had done to deserve this second chance at happiness, but he was not going to question it. He was just going to hold on tight and be grateful. The next few months were the happiest of Kurt's life. He and Olivia courted properly, despite living in the same house. He brought her wildflowers from the fields. They went on picnics by the creek that ran through his property. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories and dreams. Olivia thrived on the ranch. She expanded the garden until it was producing enough vegetables to last them through winter with plenty to spare. She started raising chickens, and their cheerful clucking became a familiar sound around the property. She even helped with the cattle, proving herself to be a capable hand despite her small size. Kurt took her into Verdi occasionally for supplies, and he noticed how people's attitudes toward her began to change. When she walked beside him, when it was clear she had his protection and affection, suddenly the same people who had shunned her before became polite, even friendly. It made Kurt angry, but Olivia just shrugged it off. People are who they are, she told him. I am not interested in winning over those who only respect me because of my association with you, but I appreciate that you stand by me. Always, he promised. In October, as the weather began to cool and the aspens turned gold in the mountains, Kurt took Olivia into town for a special purpose. He had been planning this for weeks, working with a jeweler in Carson City to create something perfect. When they arrived at the restaurant where they had shared their first meal, Olivia looked at him suspiciously. What are we doing here? It is not a special occasion. It is about to be. Kurt led her to the same table by the window and asked her to sit. His hands were shaking, and he felt more nervous than he had ever been in his life. Olivia, I told you months ago that I wanted to court you properly. I wanted to do this right. You have, she said softly. Kurt, what is going on? He dropped to one knee beside the table, pulling a small box from his pocket. Around them, other diners began to notice, their conversations fading to whispers. But Kurt only had eyes for Olivia, for the way her face transformed from confusion to wonder to joy. Olivia Dawson, you walked into my life when I had given up on ever being happy again. You brought light and love and laughter into a house that had been empty for too long. You make me want to be a better man. You make every day brighter just by being in it. He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small diamond. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner for all the days we have left? Olivia was crying again, but she was also laughing, and she slid from her chair to kneel with him on the floor. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. I will marry you, Kurt. I cannot imagine anything I want more. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed to the sound of applause from the other diners. Mrs. Patterson brought them champagne on the house, and the celebration continued long into the evening. When they finally returned to the ranch, Olivia kept holding her hand up to watch the diamond catch the lamplight. I cannot believe this is real, she said. A year ago I was starving in a shack, and now I am engaged to the man I love, living in a home that feels like heaven. It is real, Kurt assured her, pulling her into his arms, and it is only going to get better. They were married in December, on a clear, cold day when the sun sparkled on the frost-covered ground. The ceremony was small, held in the church in Verdi with only a handful of guests. Henderson from the general store attended, looking sheepish when he offered his congratulations. Mrs. Patterson was there, along with a few of the neighboring ranchers and their wives, but Kurt barely noticed anyone except Olivia. She wore a dress she had made herself from white linen, with lace trim she had purchased with her own carefully saved money. Her hair was pinned up with wildflowers that Kurt had somehow managed to find despite the season. She looked beautiful, ethereal, like something from a dream. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Kurt kissed her with all the love and passion he had been holding back, and he felt her respond with equal fervor. They were really married. She was his wife. The thought filled him with a joy so profound it almost hurt. The wedding party returned to the ranch for a simple reception. Olivia had cooked for days, preparing a feast that impressed everyone who attended. As the afternoon wore into evening and the guests began to depart, Kurt found himself alone with his wife for the first time as a married couple. "Happy?" he asked, pulling her close. "Happier than I knew it was possible to be," she replied, resting her head against his chest. "Thank you for finding me, Kurt. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else. Thank you for letting me love you," he said, "for loving me back." That night in the bedroom they now shared, Kurt and Olivia came together as husband and wife. It was tender and passionate and perfect, everything Kurt had dreamed it would be. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Olivia traced patterns on his chest and sighed contentedly. "I love you," she murmured. "I will love you until the day I die." "And I will love you longer than that," Kurt promised. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. A drought struck in the summer, forcing Kurt to drive his cattle to higher pastures where water was still available. Olivia went with him, insisting she would not be left behind. They camped under the stars, worked side by side in the heat, and grew even closer through the hardship. In the fall, a winter storm came early, trapping them in the ranch house for nearly a week. They spent the time curled up by the fire, reading together and talking and making love. When the snow finally cleared, they emerged to find that they had lost only 2 head of cattle, a small miracle. Through it all, Olivia proved herself to be everything Kurt had believed she was and more. She was strong and capable, never complaining about the hard work. She was intelligent, offering ideas for improving the ranch that Kurt immediately implemented. And she was loving, showing him every day through her words and actions how much she cared. In the spring of their second year together, Olivia came to Kurt with news that made his heart soar. She was pregnant. They were going to have a baby. Kurt was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. He had never thought about being a father, had never imagined he would have the chance. But now, watching Olivia's belly grow round with their child, he found himself dreaming about the future in ways he never had before. "What if I am not good at it?" he asked one evening as they sat on the porch, his hand resting on her swollen stomach. "What if I do not know how to be a father?" "You will be wonderful," Olivia assured him. "You are kind and patient and strong. You will teach our child all of those things, and I will be there with you. We will figure it out together." Their son was born on a warm July night in 1884. 2 years after the day Kurt had found Olivia feeding those stray cats. The midwife from town attended the birth, and Kurt paced nervously outside the bedroom door until he heard the first cry. When the midwife finally let him in, he found Olivia exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. "Meet your son," she said, her voice hoarse but happy. Kurt took the baby with trembling hands, staring down at the tiny face with wonder. The infant had Olivia's nose and his own dark hair. He was perfect. "What should we name him?" Olivia asked. They had discussed names for months but never quite agreed. Now, looking at his son, Kurt suddenly knew. "Daniel, after my father," Olivia smiled. "Daniel Ingram, I love it." Being a father was harder than anything Kurt had ever done, but also more rewarding. Daniel was a fussy baby who cried often and slept rarely. Kurt and Olivia took turns walking the floor with him, singing lullabies and offering comfort. There were nights when Kurt was so exhausted he could barely stand, but then Daniel would look up at him with those blue eyes so like Olivia's, and all the exhaustion melted away. Olivia was an amazing mother, patient and gentle, but also firm when needed. She nursed Daniel and sang to him and told him stories. She made toys from scraps of fabric and carved wooden blocks. She loved him with the same fierce devotion she had once shown to those stray cats, and Kurt fell in love with her all over again watching her with their son. As Daniel grew from an infant to a toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Kurt had built a solid reputation in the area as a fair dealer and a hard worker. Other ranchers came to him for advice. He hired a few hands to help with the growing herd, men he trusted and who respected both him and Olivia. On Daniel's second birthday, Olivia told Kurt she was pregnant again. This time, a daughter was born the following spring. They named her Sarah after Olivia's mother. Sarah was an easier baby than Daniel had been, quick to smile and slow to cry. Daniel was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help take care of her. The years flowed by, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Kurt and Olivia's love only deepened with time. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, though now they were often surrounded by children. They still talked for hours, though the conversations were frequently interrupted by questions or requests. They still kissed like newlyweds, still held hands when they walked, still looked at each other with the same wonder they had felt that first day. When Daniel was 10 and Sarah was 8, Olivia surprised Kurt with news of a third pregnancy. She was 40 by then, and the pregnancy was harder on her body than the previous ones had been. Kurt worried constantly, hovering over her until she finally ordered him to stop fussing. "I am fine," she insisted. "Women have been having babies at my age since the beginning of time. I am strong, and this baby will be strong too." She was right. In the winter of 1894, they welcomed another son whom they named Thomas. He was the largest of their babies, and the birth was difficult, but Olivia came through it well. Thomas had Kurt's dark hair and Olivia's amber eyes, and from the moment he was born, he had a stubborn streak that made them both laugh. The children grew up surrounded by love and the wide open spaces of the ranch. Kurt taught Daniel and Thomas to ride and rope and care for the cattle. Olivia taught Sarah to cook and sew and tend the garden. But they also made sure all the children learned to read and write and cipher. They hired a teacher from Verdi to come out twice a week, and the children proved to be bright and eager students. As the children grew, the ranch continued to expand. Kurt bought more land, hired more men. What had started as a small operation became one of the more successful ranches in the area. But Kurt never forgot where he had come from, and he never forgot what Olivia had endured before they met. Every year on their anniversary, Kurt and Olivia would go into Verdi and leave food in that alley where he had first seen her feeding the stray cats. Sometimes the cats were there, sometimes not. But it had become their tradition, a way of honoring how they had found each other. One year, when they arrived at the alley, they found a young woman there, thin and ragged, feeding scraps to a dog that looked as hungry as she did. Kurt and Olivia looked at each other, and without needing to speak, they both knew what to do. Kurt approached the woman carefully. "Miss, are you all right?" she startled, just as Olivia had years before. "I am fine. I was just leaving." "Wait," Olivia said, stepping forward. "Please do not go. Are you hungry?" "Do you need help?" The woman's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. Kurt and Olivia took her to the restaurant, bought her a meal, and learned her story. She was an orphan who had come west looking for work, but had found only hardship and rejection. It was painfully familiar. By the end of the meal, they had offered her a job at the ranch. She would help Olivia with the household work and the children. She accepted with the same desperate gratitude Olivia had shown all those years ago. Her name was Margaret, and she became like family. She adored the children, and they adored her back. She blossomed at the ranch just as Olivia had, gaining weight and confidence. Eventually, she married one of Kurt's ranch hands, a good man named Joseph, and they built a house on a corner of Kurt's land. They had children of their own, and those children grew up playing with Daniel, Sarah, and Thomas. The years continued their steady march. Daniel grew into a strong, capable young man who loved the ranch and wanted nothing more than to follow in his father's footsteps. Sarah was spirited and independent, with dreams of becoming a teacher. Thomas was the wild one, always getting into trouble but with a heart as big as the Nevada sky. Kurt's hair turned gray, then white. Olivia's face gained lines, but to Kurt, she only grew more beautiful. They celebrated their 20th anniversary, then their 25th. Their children married and had children of their own, filling the ranch with laughter and life. On a warm evening in the summer of 1907, Kurt and Olivia sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. They were both in their 60s now, their bodies slower than they had once been, but their love as strong as ever. Around them, grandchildren played in the yard while Daniel and his wife prepared dinner in the house. "You ever think about that day in the alley?" Kurt asked, taking Olivia's hand in his. "Every day," she said. "I think about how close I came to giving up, to just lying down and letting the world win. And then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I had been too tired to say." "I was the one who was lost," Kurt said. "I just did not know it until I found you. You saved me, Olivia. You brought me back to life." "We saved each other," she corrected, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And we built a beautiful life together." Kurt looked out at the ranch, at the land he had worked so hard to build, at the family they had created together. He thought about that lonely man he had been 25 years ago, convinced he would die alone. He could barely remember being that person now. Olivia had changed everything. She had taken a man who was merely surviving and taught him how to truly live. "I love you," he said, the words as true now as they had been the first time he said them. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you giving your last scraps of food to those cats. I will love you for whatever time we have left, and I will love you beyond that." Olivia lifted her face to his, and they kissed as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Their grandchildren's laughter rang out in the evening air, and smoke rose from the chimney of the house they had built together, and everything was exactly as it should be. Later that night, after their family had gone and the house was quiet, Kurt and Olivia lay together in their bed, wrapped in each other's arms. Through the window, they could see the stars scattered across the vast Nevada sky, bright and eternal. "No regrets?" Kurt asked softly. "Not a single one," Olivia replied, "except maybe that I did not find you sooner." "We found each other exactly when we were supposed to," Kurt said. "Everything that came before brought us to that alley on that day. I would not change a thing." They fell asleep like that, holding each other close, two souls who had found their home not in a place but in each other. And outside, the land they loved stretched out under the stars, wild and beautiful and forever theirs. The ranch continued to thrive under Daniel's management, with Kurt offering guidance but mostly letting his son take the lead. Sarah opened a school in Verdi, teaching children whose parents could not afford to send them to the bigger schools in Carson City. Thomas, after a few wild years, settled down and became a veterinarian, the first in the area, using his love of animals and his natural gentleness to build a successful practice. Kurt and Olivia's grandchildren grew, and then their great-grandchildren. The family tree they had started with their love spread wide and strong. Every holiday, the ranch house filled with people, multiple generations gathering to celebrate and share stories and stay connected to their roots. On their 40th anniversary, the family threw Kurt and Olivia a celebration that brought people from all over the state. Former ranch hands came, now old men themselves, to pay their respects to the couple who had treated them fairly and kindly. Margaret and Joseph were there, their own children and grandchildren in tow. The governor of Nevada even sent a letter of congratulations, praising Kurt and Olivia for their contributions to the state. But the best moment of the evening came when Kurt and Olivia danced together in the barn that had been decorated for the occasion. The musicians played a waltz, and Kurt took his wife in his arms, moving slowly across the floor. Everyone else stepped back to watch, and there was not a dry eye in the place as the elderly couple swayed together, still so clearly in love after 4 decades. "Remember when I told you I could not dance?" Kurt murmured. "I remember. And yet here you are, dancing with me on our 40th anniversary." "You taught me that too," he said. "You taught me everything that matters, how to love, how to open my heart, how to let myself be happy." "We taught each other," Olivia said again, as she always did. "And I would do it all again in a heartbeat." As they grew older, Kurt and Olivia found themselves thinking more about legacy, about what they would leave behind. The ranch would go to Daniel, that was already decided. But they wanted to do something more, something that honored the love that had brought them together. After much discussion, they decided to establish a fund that would help young women in difficult circumstances. Women like Olivia had been, struggling to survive in a world that seemed determined to crush them. The fund would provide money for job training, for education, for basic necessities. It would be administered through the church in Verdi, and Margaret's oldest daughter, who had a head for numbers and a heart for service, agreed to manage it. On the day they signed the papers establishing the fund, Kurt and Olivia rode out to the eastern pasture, to the spot where they loved to watch the sunset. They dismounted and sat together in the grass, holding hands and looking at the mountains in the distance. "You think we made a difference?" Olivia asked. "Do you think our lives mattered?" Kurt looked at his wife, at the woman who had transformed his entire existence. "I know we did. We helped Margaret and she helped others. We raised 3 good children who are now raising good children of their own. We built something that will last long after we are gone, and we loved each other well. That always matters." Olivia rested her head on his shoulder. "I am tired, Kurt. My bones ache and I do not have the energy I once did, but I am not afraid. I have had such a good life. Better than I ever dreamed was possible." "Me too," Kurt said, his voice rough with emotion. "Whatever comes next, we will face it together." And they did. 2 years later, when Olivia fell ill with pneumonia and did not recover, Kurt held her hand as she passed, telling her over and over how much he loved her, how grateful he was for every moment they had shared. She died peacefully, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, but her eyes were on Kurt until the very end. Kurt grieved deeply, as was only natural after losing the love of his life. But he did not fall apart. He had promised Olivia he would be strong, would take care of himself, would continue to live even after she was gone. He kept that promise. He spent his remaining time with his family, telling stories about Olivia to the younger grandchildren who had not known her well. He worked on the ranch as much as his aging body would allow. He visited Olivia's grave every day, sitting beside the headstone and talking to her as if she could hear him. Maybe she could. He liked to think so. 3 years after Olivia's death, on a morning in early spring, Kurt did not wake up. Daniel found him in his bed, looking peaceful, as though he were simply sleeping. On the nightstand beside him was a photograph from their wedding day, Olivia young and beautiful in her white dress, Kurt gazing at her with undisguised adoration. They buried Kurt beside Olivia, and the entire town of Verdi turned out for the funeral. Daniel gave a eulogy that had everyone in tears, talking about his father's kindness and strength, about the love he and Olivia had shared, about the legacy they had built together. "My father was a simple rancher," Daniel said, "but he understood something that many people never learn. He understood that love is what makes life worth living. That caring for others, lifting them up when they fall, seeing them when they feel invisible, that is what we are here to do." He saw my mother when no one else would, and she saw him right back. Together, they built not just a ranch or a family, but a testament to what two people can create when they truly love each other. Years passed, and the ranch remained in the family, passed from generation to generation. The fund Kurt and Olivia established continued to help women in need, growing larger as family members contributed to it in honor of their matriarch and patriarch. The story of the lonely rancher and the starving woman feeding stray cats became family legend, told to each new generation as a reminder of where they came from and what mattered most. The alley in Verdi where Kurt first saw Olivia was eventually paved over, replaced by a new building. But a plaque was placed on the wall, bronze letters gleaming in the sun. It read, "On this site in 1882, Kurt Ingram found Olivia Dawson feeding stray cats despite her own hunger. Their love story began here, a reminder that kindness and compassion can change the world." And sometimes, late in the evening when the sun was setting and the shadows grew long, people swore they could see two figures sitting on the porch of the old Ingram Ranch house. An elderly couple, holding hands and rocking gently, watching the sky turn gold and pink and purple. They said you could hear them talking quietly, their voices carrying on the wind, full of love and contentment and a peace that transcended death itself. Whether it was real or just a story people told themselves, it did not matter, because the love Kurt and Olivia had shared was real. It had been real in that alley when a lonely rancher saw a woman feeding cats and recognized the beauty of her soul. It had been real through years of hard work and joy and sorrow. And it remained real long after they were both gone, living on in their descendants, in the fund that bore their names, in the very land they had loved and worked together. Their story was not one of grand gestures or dramatic rescues, though Kurt had certainly saved Olivia from starvation and despair. Instead, it was a story of two broken people finding each other and becoming whole, of walls coming down and hearts opening up, of kindness repaid with love, and love multiplying into something greater than either of them could have imagined. Kurt had fed Olivia's body when she was starving, but she had fed his heart and soul in return, filling empty spaces he had not even known existed. Together, they had created a life of meaning and purpose, proving that it was never too late to find love, never too late to start again, never too late to become the person you were meant to be, and in the end, that was the legacy they left behind. Not just land or money or descendants, though those things had their value, but the knowledge that love could transform everything. That seeing someone, truly seeing them when the world had turned away, could change both your lives forever. That kindness mattered, that compassion mattered, that taking a chance on love, even when it scared you, was always worth the risk. The Ingram Ranch still stood, over a century later, though it had changed hands outside the family eventually. The new owners, a young couple with dreams of their own, had heard the stories about Kurt and Olivia. One day, as they were cleaning out the attic, they found a trunk that had been left behind. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written by Kurt to Olivia and Olivia to Kurt over the course of their marriage. The couple spent an evening reading them, marveling at the love that poured from every page. Letters about daily ranch life mixed with passionate declarations of devotion. Notes left for each other, simple reminders to check on the cattle or pick up supplies, but always ending with "I love you." Long letters written when one of them had to be away, full of longing and counting down the days until they could be together again. The new owners carefully preserved the letters and donated them to the Nevada Historical Society, where they were cataloged and archived. Scholars studied them as examples of frontier life and marriage in the late 19th century. But what struck everyone who read them was the depth of feeling they contained, the evidence of a marriage that had been truly happy, truly fulfilling for both partners. One letter in particular became famous, quoted in books and articles about love in the Old West. Kurt had written it to Olivia on their 25th anniversary. "My dearest Olivia, 25 years ago today, I married the woman I found feeding stray cats in an alley. I thought I was rescuing you, offering you a job and a chance at a better life. But you are the one who rescued me. You took a man who had given up on joy and taught him how to laugh again. You took a heart that had grown cold and warmed it with your love. Every day with you has been a gift, even the hard days, even the days when we struggled. Because we struggled together, and that made all the difference. You fed my heart when it was starving, my soul when it was empty, my spirit when it had all but died. And I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for the day I wandered down that alley and found not just a woman feeding cats, but the other half of my soul. I love you today as much as I did on our wedding day, perhaps more, because now I know what we have built together, and it is beautiful beyond words. Forever yours, Kurt." Beneath his words, in Olivia's handwriting, was a response. "My darling Kurt, you say I rescued you, but we both know the truth. We rescued each other, two lost souls finding their way home, and what a home we have built, what a life we have made. I thank God every day for stray cats and kind ranchers and second chances. I love you beyond measure, beyond time, beyond forever. Yours always, Olivia." Those letters, that love, became an inspiration to countless people who read them. In a world that often seemed harsh and uncaring, the story of Kurt and Olivia reminded people that love could still flourish, that kindness still mattered, that one moment of compassion could change everything. And so their story lived on, passed from generation to generation, adapted and retold, but always at its heart the same. A lonely rancher found a woman feeding stray cats. He saw her kindness, her strength, her beautiful soul. And in helping her, in opening his home and eventually his heart, he found the thing he had been searching for all along. He found love. He found purpose. He found home. She, in turn, found safety and security, but more than that, she found a partner who valued her, who saw her worth when the rest of the world had dismissed her. Together, they built something that lasted, something that mattered, something that proved love was not just a fairy tale, but a real, tangible force that could transform lives and create legacies that endured long after the lovers themselves had turned to dust. The ranch still stood under the Nevada sun, the land still stretched out wild and beautiful, and somewhere in the wind that whispered through the sagebrush, you could almost hear their voices, laughing, talking, loving. forever entwined, forever together, forever proof that true love, the kind that sees and values and uplifts, never really dies. It just changes form, living on in stories and memories and the hearts of all those who believe that love, real love, is always worth fighting for.